Text cash to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB07 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 30th of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is Dewbs and Kirk. Greater Manchester police are investigating after footage has gone viral of an officer kicking a guy in the face and then appearing to stamp on his head whilst he was already down on the floor. I can tell you now, right, it's sparked debate in this country about what kind of policing we need to have. Some would say, actually, what we need is a police force. Other people would say, what we need are police services. What do you make to all of this? And Sir Keir Starmer, that's how our Prime Minister has been described following his refusal to scrap the two-child benefits cap. He also removed the whip from 7 of his MPs who had the audacity of voting in favour of that cap being removed. Is that harsh or fair? And apparently we have 3 years to prepare for war. That is according to the new head of the British Army. Your thoughts? And new rules will come into play to stop MPs having second jobs as lobbyists. Common sense if you ask me. But do you think they should go a step further and ban all second jobs? And while we're at it, what about freebies that all of these MPs get? Should they be scrapped too? All of that to come and lots more. Did you see those horrific scenes where we've had an army officer stabbed as well? What are the streets of Britain coming to? We'll get stuck into it all, but before we do, let's get the 6 o'clock news headlines.
Michelle, thanks very much indeed. Well, the top story from the GB newsroom today: a man has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving following a car accident which left 6 people dead, including 2 children in Yorkshire. Shane Roller and his partner Shannon Morgan and their daughters Ruby and Lily Morgan Roller, aged just 9 and 4, were all killed when their car collided with a motorbike. The crash happened on the A61 near the village of Mapplewell in Barnsley on Sunday afternoon. The married couple on the motorbike were named as Christopher Barton, who was 56, and 48-year-old Janine Barton. They were also both killed. Well, in other news today, police in Kent say the stabbing of a British Army officer near a barracks in Gillingham is not being treated as terrorism-related at this stage, but, however, they are being supported by counter-terror specialists. Detectives are continuing their investigations after witnesses reported hearing loud screams just before 6 o'clock yesterday evening in Gillingham. Locals rushed to help the officer, including his wife, just in time to see the attacker, who was wearing a mask, flee on a moped. A suspect was arrested on suspicion of attempted murder about 20 minutes later. The victim, aged in his 40s, was taken to hospital. He has serious injuries. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, says she's being kept up to date on the investigation.
This is an appalling attack on a serving soldier. My thoughts go to him and to his family, wishing him a speedy recovery. This is an ongoing police investigation by Kent Police. It's really important that they have everyone's support in this investigation. But this was just appalling attack on a serving soldier, and I know that the whole country will be thinking of him and his family and wishing him a speedy recovery.
Well, in the House of Commons today, Sir Keir Starmer accused the previous government of losing control of Britain's borders as he took part in his first PMQs as Prime Minister. Reform UK's Peter Lowe quizzed the Prime Minister on Labour's migration plans, claiming that the failure to control the UK's borders had damaged communities. The Prime Minister conceded that small boat crossings on the Channel are a serious issue, but he laid the blame on the Tories.
I'm not sure I agree with his numbers, but look, I do think that it's serious that the previous government lost control of our borders. Record numbers have crossed the Channel since the Leader of the Opposition, when he was Prime Minister for 18 months, 50,000 people crossed the Channel. It's a serious issue that requires a serious answer. And that is why we will set up our Border Security Command to take down the gangs that are running this vile trade. What we won't do is waste further time on a gimmick that cost a fortune and remove just 4 volunteers.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak used today's Prime Minister's questions to call for tougher sanctions on Russia. The Leader of the Opposition said the work of the previous government had laid the groundwork for stronger action against Moscow, which he says will help fund Ukraine's reconstruction. And taking a slightly lighter tone, the former Prime Minister joked as he sent best wishes to Britain's Olympians.
And I also join with the Prime Minister in his warm words about our Olympic athletes.
Yeah.
I've no doubt that after years of training, focus and dedication, they'll bring back many gold medals. Although, to be honest, I'm probably not the first person they want to hear advice from on how to win. But I'm glad in our exchanges.
Now, Eluned Morgan is set to become the first Minister of Wales, making her the first woman to take on the top job. 57-year-old Baroness Morgan, who's the Welsh Health Minister, was the only contender to lead Welsh Labour after nominations closed. She's replacing Vaughan Gething, who announced his resignation last week after only 4 months in the job. Although she's been formally announced today, she won't immediately become First Minister, as that requires a confirmation vote in the Senate. Let's bring you up to date on events in the United States now, where the gunman who tried to kill Donald Trump searched online for details concerning the assassination of John F. Kennedy. FBI Director Christopher Wray told committees in Washington today that the would-be assassin's search history was perhaps an early indication of his plan. But he also acknowledged that there are still open questions about the attack itself. Mr. Wray's appearance comes a day after Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle resigned over her handling of the shooting. And President Biden, we're expecting, will be making an address to the nation from the Oval Office in Washington later on, as a poll puts Kamala Harris ahead of Donald Trump for the very first time. Joe Biden's presumed successor has a 2-point lead, we're told, over the Republican nominee. That's according to a new poll conducted by Reuters Ipsos. And that's a change from last week when Donald Trump was 2 points ahead of the president. And it comes as Mr. Trump files a complaint with the US Election Commission in an attempt to stop Joe Biden's election funds being transferred to his vice president's campaign. One last story for you. A diver has discovered a bronze cannon on the shipwreck of a warship that was destroyed by gunpowder in 1665. It was a massive explosion, apparently, and it happened to the 17th century ship called the London, forming part of a convoy sent in 1660 to collect Charles II from the Netherlands and restore him to the throne. The prized cannon was discovered buried in silt and clay on the seabed, where the protected shipwreck lies in 2 parts. Guess where as well? Just off Southend Pier in Essex. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Polly Middlehurst. I'm back in an hour. See you then.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that, Polly. I mean, I've got to start my programme by just reflecting on that awful situation you've just been here described in those headlines there. The situation where that serving army officer has been hacked in that way. I mean, obviously, just to echo what you've been saying, their thoughts are, of course, with that victim, and I hope he really does make a speedy recovery. But what on earth are our streets coming to in this country? Please give me your thoughts on it all. Alongside me tonight till 7 o'clock, I've got my panel, the columnist at the Mail on Sunday, Peter Hitchens, and the co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Good evening, gentlemen, to both of you. If anyone's sitting at home thinking, what's Michelle playing at? Why ain't she getting stuck into a full debate about that situation with the stabbing? Believe you me, I have some very strong opinions, but of course I would never want to jeopardise any legal outcome, so I'll save my opinions on that for another day. But there are lots of other things that I want to talk to you about in this country. Keir Starmer, he's been called Sir Kid Starver. I want to look at his response to this two-child benefits cap. I also want to ask if we've got imminently ahead of us potential World War III. Is that just fear-mongering or what? But lots more I want to talk about first, and you know the drill. You can get in touch with me all the usual ways. You can email gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go to the website, which is gbnews.com/yoursay. And I just want to be clear, because lots of people email me and say, Michelle, that email address doesn't work. gbnews.com/yoursay, that's a website. That's where you can chat to me and to each other. And, of course, you can tweet or X me at GBNews. You're very welcome wherever you're watching or listening tonight. Now, you might have seen a video that's gone absolutely viral on the internet. I'll try and show you a short clip of that, but I'll just describe what it is. It's an incident that seems to have unfolded in Manchester Airport, and the bit that's been filmed is always the way with these kind of things. You seem to miss out the build-up to some of this, and then it seems to start filming when, you know, terrible things seem to be unfolding. In the video that's gone viral, it basically shows a police officer. He appears to be kicking and then stamping perhaps on a man's head who has been somewhat restrained onto the floor. It's created huge conversations tonight. It's received a response from Greater Manchester Police, which I'll just read to you. They're saying that officers have been called to an altercation between members of the public at the airport, basically. They're saying while they was trying to arrest one of the suspects of the earlier altercation, 3 officers were subject to a violent assault where they were punched to the ground. A female officer, apparently, suffered a broken nose, and all 3 were taken to the hospital for treatment. The attending officers were firearms officers, and there was a clear risk during this assault of their firearms being taken away from them. 4 men were arrested at the scene for a fray and assault on emergency service workers. They say they acknowledge the concerns of the conduct within the video, and our professional standards are assessing this. Now, again, the key words there, people have been arrested again, so hands are somewhat tied when it comes to debating that issue. So I shall park that specific one to the side, but I want to have a broader conversation, if you will indulge me, because policing and the way our police conduct themselves on the streets of Britain has been a subject of debate for a very long time. I'm a very strong believer in law and order. I've repeatedly said on my programme I want to see more police force, more police force and less of police service. I want to see less dancing, kneeling, clown cars and all the rest of it. And I want people to understand you don't mess around with the police officers. I'm obviously not saying that I condone stamping on heads or anything like that, but I do feel like we've lost the basics of policing in this country a bit. What do you think, Peter?
Well, we have, but not perhaps in the way that you mean. The great problem which we have is that the police have, over many, many years now, become so absent from our streets and our lives and have so little contact with law-abiding people that they really have very little influence over what goes on. And their principal characteristic is absence. They're just not to be seen in the way that when I was growing up in this country, they were to be seen everywhere, patrolling on foot in towns and cities, and very visible in the countryside where there were police houses in most villages. There were police to be seen. They had a strong relationship, as I say, with the law-abiding, and they were respected by the law-abiding, and as a result, they were respected by everybody else too. They knew what was going on, and they were a very effective force, your chosen word, of citizens in uniform who were in alliance with the rest of the citizenry against crime and disorder. That ceased. I wrote a book about this some years ago called The Abolition of Liberty, in which the whole process is described. It ceased long ago, actually in the 1960s. Piece by piece it was dismantled, and it's now almost entirely vanished. And we have a police force which, instead of preventing crime and disorder by presence, rushes uselessly to the scenes of crime after it's happened, which is totally ineffective and will never ever answer the question. The best symbol of this is the 999 police service, a ludicrous pretense now. The police simply cannot keep up with the calls that come in, so they just don't really answer them. And the idea that if everybody thinks that when they're in trouble they call the police will come, just wait till it happens. They can't, they won't, they're not capable of it. The whole purpose of the police has been changed, and the new form of policing does not work, and we should go back to the original form, which continues to work and would work very well if we reintroduced it.
Aaron?
Well, it doesn't look like reasonable force, the video that we saw. And I also take any press release from the police, any police force, but particularly the Metropolitan Police Service, I know that's not this particular force, when there is a flare-up and it could be subject to real media scrutiny. You know, an amazing statistic, the London Metropolitan Police Service have 92 press officers. We've got the Evening Standard, the paper of record, really, for London. It's about to go weekly. It's moving away from a daily edition to a weekly edition. I find it remarkable that the Met have 92 press officers, yet we're not even going to have a daily newspaper that can do original news gathering and journalism for London. So the press releases, park that. We'll know the facts, I'm sure, in a week or two. But on the details and the particulars of this particular instance, it doesn't seem like reasonable force, no.
I'm going to... in a second, I'm going to show you it will be blared out because I know there'll be kids watching, so just in case you're not familiar with that. But one of the things that's changed the game, and I don't envy police officers, because I think the second that something kicks off, whatever it is, it's uploaded literally within seconds to social media. Everybody becomes these kind of armchair experts in policing, myself included, by the way. I hold my hands up, I've probably done it myself multiple times. And when you talk about this need for press officers and so on and so forth, they must have to spend so much of their time policing optics. And do you think that's just part of the job? Do you think that it's, you know, are we going in the right direction with that or not?
Well, I certainly don't think the London Metropolitan Police Service requires 92 press officers. I mean, the average regional police force has about 20 press officers, which I think is just absurd, frankly. But on this thing about armchair commentators, I totally buy that point, and that's why I'm saying it appears, from what we've seen in that clip, to be unreasonable force. Now, we don't know the full story.
Well, I think that's the point, isn't it? We can't...
hence my caveat.
It's very dangerous for us to discuss the incident at all, and I think we shouldn't. I think we do need to discuss the kind of police force we have as opposed to the kind we used to have, and whether we should take steps to get back to having the sort that we used to have, in which incidents of this kind were, how shall I put this, very mildly, a lot rarer. The whole point of the police, as Robert Peel set out when he set them up in the form which this country chose, was, as I say, citizens in uniform who were not a threat to liberty. They were deliberately non-military. They were given non-military uniforms. The only weapon they carried was a wooden truncheon which was concealed. They were entirely unlike the continental police forces, which Parliament refused to copy. The reason why we had a very sensible, civilised police force in this country from the early 19th century onwards, because Parliament said, we're not going down the route of France and the other major countries in Europe. We're not having a police force which is effectively an army of the state, oppressive, and basically a special body of armed men to keep the populace under control. We're a free country. We're going to have a police force designed for a free country. It's not going to be national. They're not going to look like soldiers. They're not going to act like soldiers. They're not going to walk like soldiers. They're not going to be armed like soldiers. They're going to be different. And we had it. And for 140 years, it worked a treat. And then suddenly, in the middle 1960s, Liberal reformers, headed by the then Labour Home Secretary Roy Jenkins, decided they knew better. And one of the first things they did was they got rid of the regular preventive foot patrols, which were the great characteristic of the police, which made them a reassuring presence on every street of every town all the time. They got rid of that, and they turned the police into a fire brigade which reacted ineffectually to crime and disorder after it happened. And the other thing they did was they broke that contact between the daily hourly contact between individual police officers and the law-abiding public. Most of the members of the public the police meet now are not law-abiding. So they refer now to the public as civilians.
Yes.
This is a disgraceful event, as if the police were again, a special body of armed men in the same way they have in the continent, who have nothing to do with the public and don't serve them. They don't serve the public now, they serve the state. And it's a completely wrong and different thing. And this is what people need to examine. I've been going into this, arguing about it now for years and years and years. So I wrote this book, I pressed it into the hands of serving Home Secretaries, the commissioners of the Metropolitan Police. No one will pay the slightest attention. Nonetheless, I persist. It's time we did. Something has to be done or it will get worse.
Aaron, final word to you.
Well, I agree with much of what Peter just said there, but what I would say is, look, in the instance that we just saw a moment ago, that man was on the floor, he was already restrained, he doesn't need to be kicked and stamped on. If he wasn't already restrained, that's a conversation, it's a live situation. But to me, that speaks of an absence of professionalism. We need to have a conversation about the kinds of people we're recruiting into the police. Are they good enough? Are they fit enough? Are they intelligent enough? That's a big conversation because, frankly, the calibre of police officers that I meet in general isn't as high as I'd like it, given the power that we're giving them.
But didn't they make it a degree? Didn't you need to have
well,
a degree?
You don't need to have a degree to be intelligent, but I take your point.
I think that, didn't they make policing a degree profession? So that you need to have now a degree. Well, someone at home will know the answer to that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. And I'm sure it was the British Transport Police, they scrapped their compulsory fitness tests.
Bleak tests.
Yeah. So you can have all the people meandering around in the land, but if they're going to get outrun by a 5-year-old, it's not very effective.
It's a different... When I was researching this back in the early years of the century, I remember coming across an interview with a police woman in one of the national newspapers, and she said, policing nowadays is a sedentary occupation, so I need to get fit some other way. And that tells you everything you need to know. Policing, a sedentary occupation, that's what they do. They sit at desks looking at computers, or they sit in cars. They don't go out on foot into the streets. Therefore, they do not build the sort of relationship with the public which enables them to defuse and control unpleasant incidents in the way that they used to do.
They seem to manage to take to the streets on things like Pride Parade, when they're doing the dances, or they seem to take to the streets on their knees.
Well, as you know, I'm as against that as you are, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about having a perpetually preventive, foot-patrolling, present police force of the kind which we used to have and which used to work, which I remember. And it worked, and everybody who lived with it, I won't say under it because it wasn't oppressive, everybody who lived with it will tell you the same thing. It worked. The police were not the army of the rich, as some idiots say. They were the army of the respectable and the well-behaved and the law-abiding.
The wonderment of yesteryears. Sure. What do you think? What is the future
of policing? It just shows. You don't have to go to the moon to find out how to make things better. You can just look at your own country.
You see, I've started something now. I started something, haven't I? Look, and did he mention he's written a book about this, everyone? There you go. That could be homework. Look, after the break, I want to talk to you.
People would read it.
Kids, they're going to read it.
I wish they would, because they'll be the members of a very small minority.
I'm going to bring the town police in a minute and sort him out. After the break, Sir Keir Starmer...
Pick me up by my braces, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm going to twang his braces in a minute. Sir Keir Starmer, he has got rid... Well, he's removed the whip from 7 people that had the audacity to vote against removing the 2-child benefits cap. Your thoughts on this? Is he really the meanie that he's been made out to be? Your thoughts?
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Your mother's story is, if you don't mind me saying, quite tragic. It touched me when I was reading it this morning, Myra, because she has now passed away and she hasn't been here to see kind of justice served, has she?
That's correct. She she died not knowing that she was correct, that Horizon was a flawed system.
And Myra, when you saw, I don't know whether you saw much of Sir Ed Davey during the election campaign, going down water slides, bungee jumping and bouncing around on sort of inflatables. Knowing that he played such a significant role in that difficult period of time with your mum, how did you react to those images?
I'm of the opinion that basically they're all as culpable as each other over all of the years. So I think basically every party had its failings. We knew Horizon was wrong, but nobody would believe us. Even the Postmasters Federation didn't help. They ended up speaking to my mother like she was a thief.
Are you still angry? And what do you want to see from Sir Ed Davey today?
Angry, yes, very angry. I've been furious throughout. Sir Ed Davey today, I know he will apologise. He's already done it. If he means what he says, he'll carry on campaigning to try and get proper redress from the compensation schemes, from the thousands of us who still don't have our money. I was made an offer, the £70,000 that went missing, that they stole from us, they offered me 50 because that's all they could find in their records.
The People's Channel. Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
I'm Arlene Foster on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7, the columnist at The Mail on Sunday, Peter Hitchens, and the co-founder of Novara Media, Aaron Bastani. Rosalia, I like that name. You say, can I just say, I really like the two gentlemen on your panel tonight. They are very interesting men and just very nice to listen to. That's nice, isn't it?
Kind.
Lots of people asking, what is the context for that video that you've just been playing? It's as I described in that police statement that they just made. But as I always say with these things, it's always fascinating, isn't it, how the videos only seem to start at certain points. I'll let you guys be the judge of all that. But look, Sir Keir Starmer, he's become under the spotlight again today because you'll be familiar by now with the vote on the SNP amendment, which took place last night. The Labour Party had been whipped not to vote in support of that. 7 MPs didn't follow that advice. They voted essentially to remove the 2-child benefit cap. As a result, Sir Keir Starmer has removed the whip from those people for 6 months. Also, interestingly, 40-odd Labour MPs didn't actually vote, and there'll be a variety of reasons for that. Yeah. But some of those people wouldn't have voted because they didn't have the chops to be able to come down on one side or another, which I don't think should be allowed. But anyway, the criticism towards Starmer, is it fair or not?
Well, it's very fair. I mean, some people are saying that this was a masterstroke. He's managed to achieve so much. But, you know, this morning there wasn't a single government minister on the airwaves going onto the TV studios to defend what he's done.
So what? Why does he have to explain himself?
Well, you're the government. I mean, that's the big shift, isn't it? They're now the government. There's the King's Speech. You've just suspended 7 MPs who were elected by their constituents not even a month ago. They no longer represent those constituents as Labour MPs. You have a duty, a responsibility to explain to those constituents and the rest of the public why you've done that.
But you know why? I think because they were told to vote with the government. Those ones chose not to. What do you need him to explain?
It's unprecedented.
So what? He's a new era, doing things
differently. Say that. But they didn't put any ministers up, which suggests to me they're not particularly proud of what they've done and they're not willing to explain it. I think that's evasive. I don't think people like that.
Really?
Yes.
So let me ask you this at home. Do you care that a minister wasn't put up to explain this decision today? Well, does that bother you?
Well, hold on. When the Tories did it, Labour definitely cared. So if nothing else, it's deeply hypocritical.
Do you think he should have taken the action that he's taken?
Look, if you try and look objectively at this, I can understand both sides of the argument. I personally agree with these 7 MPs. I think we should scrap that cap on child benefits with regards to 2 children. That's my view. But I can understand both sides of the argument. But what I would say is 6 months just seems incredibly draconian. And as I've said, without precedent, Blair never did anything like this. Johnson didn't do anything like this in terms of a King's Speech. When he did do something like this, it was about getting Brexit over the line, a massive national constitutional issue, more than 20 MPs. When it came to the Liberal press, when it came to Labour MPs, I didn't hear the end of it. Apparently, this was the beginning of fascism. But now that Keir Starmer's done it, nobody seems to care.
Double standards in the press, perhaps, Aaron says.
Keir Starmer's progress to Downing Street has been almost entirely based upon him saying, I'm not Jeremy Corbyn. And look at all the people who he's just suspended. They're all Corbynites. So he's keeping up what I believe is called triangulation. You try and persuade this group over there, A, that you're their friends, because this group over there, B, appear to be your enemies, and this group over there, A, don't like them, so you hope they'll like you. That's all it is. Bill Clinton made an art form out of it, but you try and define what you are and what you stand for by attacking other people, and it works. A treat. People are taken in by it all the time. It won't make any difference to anything. Any more than the revolt will.
Are people taken in by it?
Yes, of course they are.
He's got...
People are taken in... Look at the last election. If you don't believe people are taken in by political slogans, then...
I am looking at the last election.
For heaven's sake.
He only won 9.7 million votes. You know, you cannot...
20% of the eligible election.
Yeah, I mean, you know...
But he won the election.
Well, no, I appreciate that, Peter.
On the preset terms. I mean, that's how he had to win it, and he did it. There you are. And it was done on the basis of almost completely... I won't say fraudulent, because that would be paying a compliment.
You'd be like
on the basis of never, ever saying what he was going to do.
They got 9.7 million
Nobody knows who they are or what they are, and yet they got elected. How can this be done without people being fooled by technique?
They got 9.7 million votes. It's the lowest number of votes ever for a majority of one, let alone 172, 173, or now 165.
Yeah, okay, but so what? Nonetheless, they now have all the immense powers of a lawful government, including the prerogative powers which were discussed.
Rare example of us disagreeing.
Enormous powers. They've got them according to the rules. They got them by using electoral skills.
Look, this is meant to be the honeymoon period. This is meant to be good vibes. Everybody likes you. You're meant to be like Hugh Grant in Love Actually, right? The Prime Minister,
does anybody still care about that?
No, it's about your honeymoon. It's about good vibes. I think immediately...
the Rishi Sunak was sucking up.
Well, no, I think immediately creating negativity...
If that's a honeymoon, they're certainly having one.
I think immediately creating negativity around your premiership within 3 weeks, when you only got 9.7 million votes, not a massive mandate, I think it's very risky. You're saying this is about triangulation. If it was about triangulation, they would have put ministers on the media this morning. They didn't.
They'd need to, because here we have Sir Keir Starmer, the alleged right-winger, appearing to be right-wing by attacking the Corbynites, who are allegedly the left-wing. I mean, I know and you know that Keir Starmer is well to the left of Jeremy Corbyn, so this is all bilge. But that's how it works, and people are taken in. And the main people you take in by it are... hesitate for a moment while I take a breath. They are political journalists, who are the most politically ignorant people in the country and plainly selected for that purpose.
So, the two-child benefits cap, do you think that should remain or be removed, Peter?
I think I would certainly like to see the government do more to encourage people to have children, because at the moment the level of numbers of children in families is disastrous for this country, and we're well below replacement level, and a lot of continental countries do it better. Whether child benefits the best way of doing it is another matter. But if you're going to say that, and I do, I have things that I would say that this country should stop spending money on, so that it could afford it. But the Starmer government has nothing of that kind to say. It still, for instance, believes in maintaining our absurd superpower nuclear weapons, which were designed for a much richer and more powerful country in circumstances which no longer exist and which we cannot afford. And as long as you do that, there'll be very little money for anything of this kind, just for instance, nor do they have any serious plans to get the huge number of people who are being paid to do nothing into productive work. There just aren't any, nor do they have any plans for turning our schools from nurseries of ignorance into actual schools. None of these things, which would be necessary to pay for and make possible a serious encouragement of having more children, are being contemplated. So it's useless saying, yes, I'd love to have more child benefit, because you've got no idea where it's going to come from. Well, politics, it has to be about having realistic arguments for things you can realistically do.
We found $3 billion for Ukraine.
See, and this is one of the points I was going to make. Because he says, Keir Starmer says, the reason that he won't commit to lifting this cap right now is it's going to cost £3.4 billion a year, and he can't say where that cash is going to come from. Then on the other hand, he will clearly say, as you've just pointed out, that we will give Ukraine, and I won't say they will give Ukraine because they don't have any money, it's our money, that we will give Ukraine £3 billion a year for as long as it takes. And I think, as long as what takes? How are we finding this magic money tree to involve ourselves in every single foreign conflict in the land, while simultaneously being OK with children being in poverty in our own country? I think it's pathetic.
People don't object to it. I've written and spoken at ill-attended public meetings in large circulation newspapers, on the television, on podcasts, saying that Britain has absolutely no reason to be involved in a Russo-American war over the territory of Ukraine over and over and over again. All that happens is people shout at me, Putin parrot, Putin apologist, Kremlin agent, and nobody wants to think about it. And in Parliament today we had the equivalent. We had Rishi Sunak, who's supposed to be the leader of the opposition, which is a fairly clearly defined position. You would think when you looked at it that it meant you led the opposition to the government, sucking up openly to Keir Starmer on his Ukraine policy.
Well,
we haven't got an opposition.
Well, we're going to talk in 2 minutes about the potential of World War III. I'll come on to that. But back to child benefit. A lot of my viewers, and by the way, it's not child benefit, because you get child benefit for however many children. This is about how many benefits you can get when things like universal credit and stuff beyond your first 2 children. Many people are getting in touch, Aaron, because you just said that you want this cap removed.
Yeah.
People are essentially, I'm going to paraphrase because there's so many people saying similar things. Why should the taxpayer be responsible for funding your children?
Yeah.
What's your answer?
Nobody's having children. The birth rate in Scotland, fertility rate in Scotland is 1.2, in London it's 1.34.
But they've had these children. These children are already here.
No, but it's a disincentive. It's a massive disincentive. We've got expensive childcare. We've got expensive housing. We have very little help from the government in terms of looking after children early on. And people say, well, the woman should stay at home. Well, work, unfortunately, is not sufficient for just one person in the household to work, and you can do that anymore. And you have a choice. I know that
But
viewers...
about these children that are already here.
No, but it's
what the issue is.
It's a massive disincentive to having children, because, for instance, if I have 3 children with my wife and I die, I know for a fact the state will discriminate against us for having had that 3rd child, and she will be living in a poorer situation as a result. So what I'd say to people watching this is, you want lower migration. Well, if we have a birth rate of 1, which is where we're heading, tough. You're going to have higher migration. So we need to rethink the welfare state around having more children, looking after children, raising them to be productive members of society. Not always the case, of course, but we can try and maximise the possibility that happens.
Well, that's part of the point of this. We have very poor arrangements for actually bringing people up as active members of society, productive members of society. Our schools in particular, and many of our universities, are a national disgrace. So there's no point having the children if you then don't bring them up as valued and active members of society, which is another part of the problem. But we are going to come to the point where it's going to be one-to-one, people on pensions and people working, in which case
society will collapse.
Society collapses.
Society will collapse. I don't think people realise.
Warning, society.
No, I don't think people realise it will collapse. The system will no longer work.
There are so many reasons why that's going to happen.
Well, we'll come on to one of the reasons because.
Count the ways.
By the way, my mum and dad did their bit for society. I'm one of 6, ladies and gentlemen. One of 6. There's more of me. Look, you talk about society collapsing. The new boss of the army says that we perhaps might not even get to that point, because before we know it, we might even end up in World War III. Apparently, we've only got 3 years to prepare for that. Your thoughts?
Hello again and welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Gloomy skies overnight and into the start of Thursday for many of us. Outbreaks of rain, but it will turn brighter later on. Now, we started Wednesday with a ridge of high pressure. Didn't last long. Weather fronts are now moving in from the west, and they are thickening up the cloud in many parts of the UK and bringing extensive low cloud to western parts and southern parts of the country, with hill fog, coastal mist and areas of rain and drizzle. Nevertheless, with the largely cloudy skies overnight, it is going to remain mild in some places, rather muggy, 15 or 16 Celsius first thing. But if you're in the south and southwest, expect a gloomy start to Thursday. A lot of low cloud covering the hills, bringing some mist and fog to coastal parts as well, and some more persistent and heavier bursts of rain into South Cornwall and South Devon through the morning. Wales, cloudy and damp, the worst of the drizzle and low cloud over hills. Likewise for northwest England, but for Scotland and Northern Ireland, something a little brighter first thing, certainly for eastern Scotland. Some sunny spells coming through, largely dry here, showers pushing into western Scotland. And through the morning, we're going to see things cheer up across the northern two-thirds of the UK. The cloud will lift. There will be some cloud breaks, although there will still be some showers arriving across western Scotland, Northern Ireland into northern England. Mostly dry for Wales by the afternoon, as well as the Midlands, but for the south and southeast, outbreaks of rain, heavy at times, and as a result, significantly cooler compared with Wednesday. That rain's out of the way by Friday morning, and then for most, it's a much brighter start to the day. Sunny spells, but further showers are likely in places, especially, although not exclusively, across Scotland, Northern Ireland, West Wales and Western England. Saturday, more widespread and heavier downpours for a time, interspersed by sunny spells, sunshine on Sunday.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Gary King in Kent. The M25 currently blocked in both directions. Long delays after an accident involving several vehicles between Junction 1B at Dartford and Junction 2 at the Darrenth interchange. Delays though back towards Junction 29 at Romford. In Berkshire on the anti-clockwise M25 looking very slow after an earlier breakdown around Junction 13 at Staines. Delays go back towards Junction 14 at Heathrow Terminal 4. Cheshire, the northbound M6 busy between Junction 20 at the M56 and Junction 21 at Woolston. Lancashire, the eastbound M58 currently closed, traffic stationary after an accident around Junction 4 at Skelmersdale. And in Glasgow, the eastbound M8 currently blocked, long delays after an accident around Junction 13 at the M80.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, Till 7. Peter Hitchens, Aaron Bastani remain alongside me now. The new boss of the army has warned that Britain has to be prepared to fight a war in 3 years' time. I mean, let's just cut to the chase about this. Apparently, he's warning World War III could perhaps be imminent. Aaron Bastani, where are you on this?
It strikes me as quite ridiculous. Britain, after 7 months of attacks, hasn't been able to get rid of the Houthis. They tried, they failed. So the idea that we're going to go toe-to-toe with Russia, China and Iran together strikes me as quite wild. I think Britain needs to take a step back, our political class needs to take a step back and be honest with the public and say we don't have the industrial capacity, we don't have the manufacturing base, we don't have the skills, actually, anymore, to have the kind of war economy that these people are talking about. We haven't had that kind of economy. You might say for 20 years, you might want to go further back. We probably could have done that about 20 years ago, but we don't have the steel manufacture, we don't have the semiconductors, we don't have the engineers. So it's a flight of fantasy, frankly, for bigger budgets, to buy more arms and military products, which is fine. That's what people in the military do. They have to make their case. I get it. But using this sort of this concern over World War III. If there was World War III, look, we are incredibly poorly prepared and that won't change in 3, 5, 10 years.
Peter?
Who do we think we are? I'm completely baffled. We carry on behaving as if we were a major world power, rich and militarily powerful, politically powerful and diplomatically powerful. Most countries in the world don't spend more than 10 minutes a week thinking about Britain, and that's if we're lucky. We're not considered to be important anymore. You go to the United States, read American newspapers, watch American news channels, you won't hear this country even mentioned most of the time. It doesn't matter. We matter to ourselves immensely, and our own national defence is hugely important, and that basically needs to be conventional. Though, of course, since we have a nuclear weapon, it would be foolish to get rid of some sort of final nuclear deterrent as an absolute last resort. But our conventional defences are a national disgrace. The Navy is a melancholy remnant. The Army is pitifully small, and we're losing all the time the vital, experienced non-commissioned officers and officers who are the core of any armed force, because we can't retain them, because the smaller our armed forces get, the more pressure people have. So we're making a complete mistake. At the same time, we're posturing. Somebody explain to me, what is the British interest in a war between America and Russia on Ukrainian soil? Where does it touch our national interest, except insofar as we toady all the time to the United States? I've said this before, I'll say it again. If I were the United States of America, I would not want an ally as feeble, as slobbering, as pathetically hanger-on-ish as we are. You don't want an ally who is such a complete lickspittle. You want an ally who might conceivably stand up to you, who doesn't always say yes and how high whenever you say do this or jump. And the relations we have with the United States are absurd, and they will become more absurd, it seems to me, when the new president, whoever he or she is, takes office. Where will we stand with this this country that we constantly suck up to? I don't think they're going to be able to stand this special relationship.
Well, especially if it's...
Look to our own defences, but don't go on and on about world wars with people we aren't actually even in conflict with over any serious...
Well, it'll be fascinating to see if Trump does get elected, because, of course, David Lammy has described him as essentially some kind of racist and neo-Nazi sympathiser, hasn't he?
His current vice presidential running mate once called him America's Hitler, so people find themselves oddly coming round to Donald Trump when they have to deal with him.
Lee, on the website, you make a very good point. You're saying, please, can you point out that we can't even protect our own borders, Michelle, so we would have absolutely no chance whatsoever in another world war. I mean, did you see the state of Hare Hills the other day? We couldn't even sort that out, never mind a foreign conflict, I would suggest. Paul says, Michelle, please, can you tell Aaron, on the previous topic, when you're talking about getting married, having multiple children, and then who's going to support your family, tell him that there's a thing called life insurance policy. If he's so concerned, he could take that in. People work so hard week in, week out, he says. If you want to have big families, Paul's point, provide for them yourself and plan for the inevitable. There you go, Paul, I told him. What do you say back to Paul, quickly?
Well, I would say the taxpayer's paying for your kids to go to schools and to use the NHS, and to pay for the roads that you take those kids to schools and the hospitals with. I mean, we pay for all kinds of things. And the reality is, birth rates are so low, we need to incentivise families. And by the way, we could do a ton of stuff. It's barely going to touch the sides, but we need to stop that decline. It is genuinely the biggest challenge to our social system that we know, and nobody's talking about it.
We're talking about it. Did that answer your question, Paul, or not? After the break, let's return to politics. This whole situation about second jobs and so on and so forth, apparently there's a clampdown coming soon, but I would say it doesn't go far enough. And what about all these freebies, hospitalities, etc., that MPs get? Should the whole thing be shaken up? Your thoughts?
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Football and gambling can go hand in hand and cause long-term problems. New figures show that young adults aged between 16 and 24 who have bet over the last year are more likely to report mental health issues compared to those in older age groups.
And joining us now to discuss this is Matt Burgess, who is a former gambling addict and now helps those to deal with their own gambling issues.
Yeah, I think gambling is one of those things that is so accessible now. You know, everyone's got a kind of mobile phone in their pocket, walks around with a kind of 24-hour casino, if you like. So I think it's really important that people realise that we have to sort of recognise that that is a month of quite condensed gambling, and we don't want people to sort of carry that on into their everyday life, because that's when it can become really risky and you know, it could become addictive.
I had no idea, though, that it was linked to first-time gambling. For the first time, people might be able to pick up and have a go. And then it doesn't end there. It goes on, because by then you've got the bug. Is that how it works?
You've got to remember, for things like the Euros, the World Cup, so you get a lot more people watching football and therefore potentially betting on football.
May I ask you about how severe your own gambling addiction got?
Well, look, I think there was a couple of touch points for me where I realised that things were getting out of hand. There were some times at university where, you know, I kind of thought, you know, I'm definitely doing this a bit too much, but, you know, kind of thought maybe it would move on once I left, but it didn't. It did follow me. And then, you know, I got to points where I was at my worst gambling 16, 17 hours a day. I was spending huge amounts of money. It can spiral out of control very, very quickly, and that was the important thing that we want to highlight is, what can start as fun can become very, very dangerous in a sense.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tune in to Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. GB News royalty with your perfect start to the weekend. Lucky us. Feisty and fearless guests.
Well, I'm a normal person, so ask me.
Honest opinions that raises more questions than a Gary Barlow tax return. And a few surprises along the way. Might be cold in this studio. That is Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. 8 to 9 only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry, Aaron Bastani, Peter Hitchens remain alongside us. The viewer there, Paul, you've created a whole conversation there about the cost of life insurance in the break. That's what we've just been debating. It can be incredibly eye-watering, depending on your personal circumstances. But there you go. Look, let's talk about cutting your cloth accordingly. We've just been talking about poverty and the amount of cash that people have got in their back pockets. MPs, they don't do badly, you know, and there's this whole conversation about whether or not they should be able to have second jobs, what kind of second jobs and so on and so forth. Now, new plans saying that actually things like lobbying jobs could be quite severely restricted, as could be consulting, if it was around policy areas and so on and so forth. Common sense, if you ask me, and I don't think it goes far enough. But what do you think, Aaron Bastani?
I think that's right. It doesn't go far enough. But then I suppose, you know, you'll get the argument, well, surely an MP should be able to write a book or a memoir, you know, like Tony Benn. And, of course, you'd say you get 3 weeks off at Easter, right? How many jobs that pay that much with that pension get 3 weeks off at Easter? It's a great job. You get great money. You don't need to be tarting yourself off to, I don't know, law firms and...
What about being a doctor?
Well, this is the point. So some of it is, I still think you should be committed to your constituents. So I would have a hard and fast guillotine. No.
So you can't be a doctor?
No.
What, in your local hospital?
No, because your time should be committed to your constituents.
But that is helping your constituents, isn't it?
Well, I appreciate that.
To save their life.
No, I appreciate that. It's a very worthy and noble thing to be doing. Maybe during COVID you might make an exception, for instance. But by and large, I think you should not be earning any additional income while you're on MP.
So you can qualify as a doctor, and I'm sure that there'll be things that you have to do year on year to maintain your cards or whatever it is. I don't know how it works, but I'm assuming you've got to do something to keep qualified as a doctor. So you would allow all of these qualified doctors that enter things like Parliament to just go to waste.
Well, how many doctors do we have in Parliament? I think we probably have about 5 or 6.
Well, I don't know. See, then you just lost 5 or 6 doctors then.
Well, I just think if you're being paid that amount of money, there's only 650 of them, Michelle, you know, they should be wholly committed to their job as members of Parliament and legislators.
Peter Hitchens?
Being a member of Parliament isn't a job.
What is it then?
It's ridiculous that it should be treated as one. Well, who is your employer? The employer is ultimately your constituents, but you're paid as what Keir Starmer wants to see in his arrangement. You're paid by the government, and therefore you become a salaried government employee who ultimately owes his everything in his life to the government, which means that MPs will be, even more than they are now, the paid servants of the executive. And it's amazing how people go, oh, we've got to get rid of hereditary peers. They're so bad. They were appointed by their great-great-great-great-grandfathers were appointed by Charles II. So why should we have these people? And instead, we have a parliament full of people who owe their positions in that parliament to having been selected by party machines, which have decided that they are safe and not dangerous and not likely to do anything independent. And then if they make any trouble, then the whips will come down on them and unpleasant stories about their private lives will appear in the papers and they'll be forced out of their seats. And they are completely under the thumbs of the executive in whichever party it is they're in. And why anybody should want more of this and MPs to have even less recourse to any kind of independence, I don't know. The Parliament sits for far too long. It passes far too much legislation, not too little. How many times does Parliament make things worse by sitting? It should not be a full-time job. A lot of MPs' work is taken over by what borough and county councillors used to do before the disastrous local government reorganisation of '74, and that's why MPs spend so much time on drains and pavements and stuff of this kind instead of on questioning the government on national affairs. The whole job of MPs needs to cease to be a job and become what it is supposed to be. That is to say, a person representing his or her constituency and nothing else. And the idea that people shouldn't be able to have any other kind of interest or support in life is absurd.
Thomas on the website says, Michelle, all MPs should have a mandatory second job. Illegal migrant deportation officer, he says. There's a big need for those. Also under conversation perhaps should be whether or not MPs, they're paid handsomely. Why on earth do they get so many freebies? I was looking into this. Keir Starmer, £76,000 he's had in hospitality and freebies since 2019, the most out of any MPs. Get this, £16,200 worth of free clothes from a Labour peer. From the same guy, £2,400 for spectacles. How on the one hand can you push back and say things like the state shouldn't be responsible for helping multiple children while simultaneously being a high-earning, powerful grown man that needs someone else to pay for your spectacles and your clothes? It is embarrassing. Anyway, look, that is perhaps
more important issue
for another day.
Than the issue whether they have second jobs, in my view.
Well, there you go. We'll perhaps debate this next time you guys are on. But for now, look, that's all I've got time for. Aaron Bastani, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Peter Hitchens, thank you for your company too. And as always, thank you to each and every single one of you that choose to spend the hour watching Dewbs and Co. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you tomorrow. Night-night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Gloomy skies overnight and into the start of Thursday for many of us. Outbreaks of rain, but it will turn brighter later on. Now, we started Wednesday with a ridge of high pressure. Didn't last long. Weather fronts are now moving in from the west and they are thickening up the cloud in many parts of the UK and bringing extensive low cloud to western parts and southern parts of the country with hill fog, coastal mist and areas of rain and drizzle. Nevertheless, with the largely cloudy skies overnight, it is going to remain mild, in some places rather muggy, 15 or 16 Celsius first thing. But if you're in the south and southwest, expect a gloomy start to Thursday. A lot of low cloud covering the hills, bringing some mist and fog to coastal parts as well, and some more persistent and heavier bursts of rain into South Cornwall and South Devon through the morning. Wales, cloudy and damp, the worst of the drizzle and low cloud over hills. Likewise for northwest England, but for Scotland and Northern Ireland, something a little brighter first thing, certainly for eastern Scotland, some sunny spells coming through, largely dry here, showers pushing into western Scotland. And through the morning, we're going to see things cheer up across the north.